Hey there, fellow streakers. It's Jeff and Jamie, and we are back with you on another podcast, and I'm excited about something.
Every time you say it's Jeff and Jamie, I feel like saying, welcome to the Jeff and Jamie Show.
There it is. Welcome to the
Jeff.
Jeff and Jamie Show. We'd love to have you today.
Jeff, can you give us a traffic report?
Is that what I sound like, a weatherman?
No.
I sound like I'm in the
feel
helicopter? Well, Jamie,
like
we've got crowded roads here.
Good morning.
Good
We're
morning.
happy to be here.
I am.
You're excited.
I'm always excited.
That
I'm
is
excited
true.
to sit and talk with you about streaking.
I'm excited
Streaking
for that
is
too.
just such a fantastic topic to speak about. And one of the things that's interesting is our developers have version 2 on the presses as far as the app is concerned. And it is
Yes.
pretty darn cool.
We have animations.
Animation. So as you complete one of your streaks, you click on it and there's all kinds of different celebrations. And we're going to have more of those as they come along. So they're calling it version 1.2. I'm kind of going, this is 2.0 because there's another thing that's in there that is team streaking. And team streaking is, I think, something that'll just take streaking to another level.
I know. We have a debate, though. We can't decide if we should call it team streaking or group streaks.
I like
kind of-
team streaks.
you
I'm
like
partial to
team
that.
streaks?
Group streaks, it loses its luster for me.
You feel like it loses luster.
It's like when we were going with publishing the book. Remember when the publisher came back and said, well, we don't know if we should call it streaking. We think it should be Streaking Mastery. Mm-hmm. And I love Streaking Mastery. And actually, that's our website, streakingmastery.com. And in fact, if you type Streaking Mastery into any search engine, you will get all of our stuff. If you type streaking, you'll get the definition of streaking coming
Right.
up first. But if you type Streaking Mastery, that's what comes up. But on the book cover itself, it kind of lost its luster for me. But also, speaking of the book cover, it's one of the things where I'm wondering if people are a little afraid to pick that thing up.
I know, because it says streaking. But we will redefine streaking.
I know, you're on that.
It's a personal mission.
And I think that we should.
It will be.
And it's the definition that should be the streaking definition throughout all the world,
Agreed.
which is the simple practice of conscious, consistent actions that create life-changing results. Happens to be the subtitle on the book, too.
Which I love that you have memorized because I still don't. I don't know why, but I still don't have that memorized. I'm like, it's the simple practice of conscious and consistent
Action
that has life-changing results.
creates
life-changing results.
Yes.
Anyway,
You know what is interesting? Coming up with that particular subtitle was quite the adventure, and every single word in that subtitle, I think, is the definition of streaking.
yes, there was a lot of time spent specifically picking out each word to truly define it so that because the title had confusion because some people used it inappropriately and we've had to remind them what streaking
And
really
I'd say,
is.
you know what? We're going to grab that back.
We are.
We are
We're
not going
taking
to
that
allow.
word back.
We're not
You
going to
stole
allow
our
that.
word, and
That's
we're not
exactly
letting
right.
you.
We're going to repurpose that word
Yes, we're repurposing it.
to what it really is meant to
But
be.
it was originally meant to, we're bringing it back to its original glory.
It's OG glory.
Yes.
Yeah,
Which was being consistent and being proud of it.
absolutely. One of the other thing I was thinking about as far as the title was concerned is when you were just kind of stating it back there as far as create.
Yes.
I love that word create. And the reason why is because it puts inside of each one of us, every single person out there, anyone who's listening to this, you are a person who is creative and can create. The process of creation or being creative is the small, simple things.
Yeah.
It is the tiniest little things that I do consistently that allows me to create. And that's across the board, whether I'm recreating or creating something within myself, a habit. Did I just say that? Yes.
Habits are good too.
No, I know.
They're not the total bad word of I like them. They're just not the defined. They just need to be more clearly defined.
Very true.
So maybe that's our whole mission. We are, what is it that you always say that the beginning is in
The beginning of wisdom.
is in the definition of terms?
You got it.
I love that.
I appreciate that you credit that
I know.
to me.
You
but
don't say it. I think
it's Aristotle, I think, or one of the great philosophers. But it is.
Somebody long time ago, way before us, said something really great, which was the beginning of wisdom is the definition of terms. Puts us all on the same page so that we understand. I also loved what you were saying in terms of create and how streaking helps us to create these results. And because I look at it and I think it's so easy to destroy But to be able to create, I think, is part of what makes us human. It's progress. It's being creative. It's
Wow. I just thought of something. That's why I'm pausing a little bit there is I was on a river raft trip in 8th grade. And we stopped at one particular place along the Green River. I did a little streaking short on this as well. It's called the Class 5 Rapids. But we had stopped along the path of the Green River, pulled off to the side, and we took this hike up into this really neat area in the mountains. And as we took this hike, we came across, I think it's a fungus, but there's fields of this fungus that took hundreds of years to grow. And when I say hundreds of years to grow, it was like a 5 or 6 inch stack. But if you touched it, it would just go to dust.
really.
Yeah. It was the most interesting thing. And so our guides, the people who are with us, they said, what we want to do is preserve this so that everyone has an opportunity to see it. So we had to really be gentle and find our way through. But what you said as far as the process of destruction, that's easy. It's those would be destroyed with just the touch.
I've always been amazed to watch when they take down a building, how quickly you can take down a building in comparison
to the years.
the years and the amount of effort and mental capacity it takes to build a structure that's going to stand.
Which is why I believe when you look at it, the whole simple practice of conscious, consistent actions that create, it is building it every single day. And that's why I think sometimes when you break a streak, it's kind of like when you touch that little piece of fungus that's grown up, it just goes whoosh.
You're like, no.
No.
You bring up where I wanted to talk today. So with it being December, I made a list of all and I've asked other people too to contribute to my list of all the things that I feel like streaking, like what streaking has given me, things that I've been able to learn and my first one on my list was patience and growth.
That is like the very
That was
first
my
thing.
number one thing that I wrote down was patience and growth was one of the first things when I was like, okay, what
And why
have
was
I
it
learned?
why was it that one came to your mind first?
Probably because patience is a hard thing to learn, I think. And isn't it interesting that like it takes time to get patience?
Right.
You can't
just
be impatient to be patient. And so as we're talking about building, or as you're talking about that plant or the fungus that takes, or sometimes I think about
So
the
do you think
stalactites
that there's some
and
people that
stalagmites.
if you're listening to this right now and you're thinking to yourself, streaking just takes too long. I mean, basically, if you look at it and say, yeah, the small, simple thing, I really appreciate that, but that just takes too long. Well, what would you do instead?
And that's the thing that's interesting is time is passing.
No matter
what. No matter what you're doing with it, it is passing.
But isn't it interesting how our brains go to this place where it's like, it just will take too long, so I won't do anything. Think about that one for just a second. Okay, I'm not going to do anything because it takes too long.
Which is
But
part
that happens.
It totally happens. That's part of what I've loved about the Laughably Simple is that in some ways it helps me to, it's an interesting thing when I am impatient with a day and I'm like, okay, I've got to get this day going. And there's things that I know there's things I need to get done that day, but there's also things that I want to be doing to improve myself. But like we've talked about a million times, it's hard to have that be top of the priority when there's so many things that are really screaming for your attention and time. And so it's a daily practice for me in being patient, in recognizing that this little thing that I'm doing is contributing.
I don't remember the saying of it takes a lifetime to build a reputation and a second to destroy it, something like that. Have you heard that before?
Yeah, I have.
Some type of quote
Which
like
is
that?
true.
Why is that though? That is so frustrating that you can be defined by one little second of something that was a mistake or didn't go well or whatever it was, yet it takes a lifetime to build it.
That's a good question.
I don't know the answer. I'm just curious as far as...
Maybe that's part of what I love about streaking, though, is that it's bringing our actions to this place of consciousness. And I think that's part of what can happen.
Because it's probably an unconscious thought that makes the destruction.
Or maybe in the opposite, too, that little things in the wrong direction can take you places you don't want to go to. But you can dismiss them because you're like, oh, it's just a little thing. It doesn't matter that much. But bad decisions made a little bit at a time are equally going places as good decisions made a little bit at a time. Did I say that very clearly?
What I look at is you are, no matter what, you're always growing. And the question is, are you consciously growing to something that's good, or are you unconsciously growing and not knowing where you're going, or are you making decisions where you're growing into
and
bad?
I don't know if I would say growing, because I think growth is a conscious decision. I think we are always making decisions. Even indecision is a decision.
Through the passing of time.
Right. I say that to myself all the time. In other words, not making a decision.
I think we need to repeat that one more time.
Decision.
Indecision is decision through the passing of time.
In other words, even if you ignore something, you're making a decision. Don't think you're not making a decision. You're just deciding to ignore it.
Exactly.
And what are you doing when you do stuff like that? You're at some level relinquishing control or the right to act upon something. You're like, I don't want to act on it. I'm just going to ignore it. Well, things don't go away just because we ignore them.
So when we talk about building and growing, and your first thing on your list as far as what has streaking given you in this season of giving, it's giving you patience and what was the other one?
Patience in growth.
Patience in growth. Okay, so here's one that I've had people ask us, how is it that you and Jamie can get on a podcast and talk with each other without really, it doesn't sound like you're struggling to have the conversation. It seems like it just flows.
That's a good question.
How would you answer that question? Because I think it relates exactly to the patience in growth. One of the things that we've done through, I don't know how many years now. I mean, we've been married 29 years.
Yeah, so 30 years.
30 years is practice talking.
Yeah.
With each other. Would you say that?
Yeah. I'm thinking back to when we very first met, and I remember I wasn't a person that would talk as in-depthly with people. And I remember talking with you, and you ask questions. You've always been someone who asks questions. And you ask questions that maybe other people wouldn't ask.
And why do you say it like that?
Because you're not afraid to talk about things, like pretty much anything.
You mean in-depth things
Yes,
that go right into the heart.
Yes. And things that maybe other people, in-depth things that some people are less comfortable talking about. I guess I was going to say more uncomfortable, but less comfortable. Same thing.
Yeah.
And so I remember having that first conversation, and you asked questions, and I remember thinking, I'm like, oh my goodness, I just told him like I had never talked to someone at that level before.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
You're welcome. So I think from the beginning, we have talked in-depthly. And then in terms of having patience, I would totally agree that it's taken time and patience, because you have to go through all of the bumpy roads to get to some of the smooth roads. Is that a good way to say it?
I'm looking at your eyes, and you've got like 16,000 thoughts going through your mind, and you're trying to pick the words to come out.
That's because it's more like 16,000 memories of conversations and things we've worked through, and not rules that we've set, but just kind of
principles that we guide ourselves by.
Yeah.
So one of the things so there's a couple of metaphors that I like to use. And the one metaphor that we have, and it's actually in the Streaking book, is we go together or we stop.
Right.
And that one has served us very well.
I agree. We go together. That one though was like about halfway through our marriage, because that one really picked up with running, and so we've used it with other stuff.
One of the first ones that I think, one of the first principles that we came up with, and I don't know if it was before we were married, we were engaged, or just after, but we're always on the same team.
Yes, that was after we were married.
Was it really?
Yeah, I feel like that was after.
That was after.
Because I remember that thing. The very first thing that I feel like that we set in our marriage, I don't know if this has anything to do with patience with growth, but maybe it does.
Oh, I think it totally does.
I look back, and it was before we were even married, actually, is that I grew up in a family that was a little bit more sarcastic, like would kind of...
Sarcasm was the form of communication.
It was a significant form of communication with my dad growing up. And so I remember one of our first interactions when I said something sarcastic to you. I believe it was that you didn't have a brain. And just joking around in my mind. But that was not much of a joke to you.
Oh, I
it was-
remember we were sitting in the back of the truck and we were headed up to go camping with friends, and we were just
I think
laughing
we were
and
just
joking.
hiking, weren't we? Anyway,
Well,
we were heading up
we
to
were
the
going up.
mountains.
We were heading up there because I remembered it was at night because there was a fire that we had afterwards. But we were
Okay.
in the back of the truck and we were joking around, and you had said something like, "You have no brain,"
right.
and that just totally shut me down
And you know what? How I knew is you stopped talking.
completely.
I was like, oh dear, I've done something wrong. He is not talking at all. And it was an interesting thing for me because honestly, I hadn't ever, it was the first time that it occurred to me that I could hurt your feelings.
Really.
Yeah. And so it was an
And what it was
interesting-
is I had a deep insecurity and still carry that insecurity with me that I really am not that smart. I mean, I can work hard and, I can get out there and move things around and do my best to make things happen. But I really don't feel like I'm any kind of smart person. And so when you said that, that just struck right to the
Struck a
core of what I felt insecure wise. It's kind of interesting that we're talking about this.
I know with everybody, but that was really to me the
Do you know
start.
what I loved about you though is that you recognized that and you came back and we talked about it.
That's what I was just going to say too. That was kind of the start of us working through things, is that I was like, huh. So I think one of the things,
I think everyone should know that we had 5 slow down talks before we got married. And what that was is we're like, this is going too fast. This relationship is we've got to slow it down. And that just seemed to pick things up.
I know. We never really slowed down. But I do love looking back. Like that has been an interesting, I remember that experience. That was the start of our relationship, was that experience and us talking about, like, I remember talking with you and you saying, I don't like sarcasm. I don't like the way it makes me feel. I feel like it's teasing people at their expense. And it was an interesting thing because I had never talked about that. To me, it was just a form of communication. But as we got to thinking, as we would talk more about it, I thought, there's a good point there. Like, you're just making fun of people. Do I need to do that? And so that really
So we decided right there and then
We
that
did.
sarcasm would not be a part of our marriage.
would not be a part of our,
Now-
at that time, it was just kind of our relationship. We were like, okay, we're not going to be sarcastic with each other. But then when we talk about this kind of patience and growth, the reason I think that has been something I come back to is because it wasn't like we just decided and never had sarcasm again. We've had different experiences
Right.
throughout our marriage that something happened or I said something or you said something, even though you're not very sarcastic very often.
Oh,
but
I can be sarcastic.
sometimes-
Thank you. I appreciate the goodwill there, but I sometimes can get on that edge, and I have to call myself back. I mean,
Right.
I think it's easy. It's an easy form of, I don't know. I wouldn't say communication, but it's something that comes easily.
Yeah.
It's more toward the natural tendency side.
And it can be a defensive mode. You're putting up defenses by bringing all the attention to another person.
Yeah.
And usually it's some sort
Or
of
trying to make myself feel a little bit better by.
or being
making-
funny. You can be
you know,
funny or
But I think to me, but though that sarcasm is not really funny. I know we laugh at it and everything else, but there is always a sting of
Yeah,
hurt
there's
in
always some little
sarcasm.
stinger in
and that's what I would say.
sarcasm.
So as I look back, as far as in our marriage and growth in our marriage, that was one of the foundational principles. We talked about being on the same team too, because I remember that one. We were playing a game with friends. Do you
Yep,
remember this?
I do. And the game got heated and we
And we were on opposite teams.
were on opposite teams and we started taking jabs at each other.
Mm-hmm.
And at the end of that night, we were both like, that's
No way,
not the way
never
we
again.
want to be.
And so from there on out, even in board games, we're like, nope, we're on the same
Same team.
or we don't play. Now,
And by same team, what we mean is that in the end, the team is you and I.
because
It's
you've gotten
not-
pretty mad at me when I've swept the board.
I
in
know.
Monopoly.
That's what I was going to say. I'm like, we haven't always been on the same team. Like, you beat me sound. That was an annoying game. Monopoly. But the same team is recognizing that the game that we're playing, and it's not a game, the game of life that we're playing, we're on the same team always, whatever
Always.
situation.
no matter what.
We're that same
And at
team.
any point in time, that's why I love we go together or we stop, is because at any point in time that it was going in a direction that you and I were starting to be separate from one another, that's when we said, that's it, we're stopping, we're coming back. And I'd love to say it was always that easy, but it was.
So that's where I've loved this patience, is looking at it and thinking. What I've loved as I look at how, my first thing when you asked, what is streaking given me? And my first one was patience and growth. I thought it's being patient to recognize that those bumpy roads, that's part of life, that you're going through it, and bringing the decisions that I make in those times of emotion or hurt or to a more conscious level, so I make better decisions, so I recognize more what I'm really choosing. And doing something small and simple daily and keeping a record of it has helped me personally to recognize that those small things that I do every day have meaning and I have control over them. And so though I have streaks that I purposely and intentionally I'm doing, doing that has helped me recognize that I can pay attention to the thought that I have and be more conscious in that, and that even that small thing can make a difference. And so being patient in that growth and recognizing that those bumpy roads take time to get through, not to just plow through them and be done with it.
So I'm thinking of a couple of streaks that you and I have together. And one of those is we pray together at least one time a day, and we read at least one verse of scripture.
Yes.
Together. Now, there have been some times where we've been pretty hot with one another, and it's been the end of the night, and we still have not said a prayer together.
I know. And I've spent some time sitting in the bed being mad, thinking, am I going to break this streak? Because I am really mad right now.
And I've thought the same thing. I'm like, fine, I'll just let the streak in. That'll be fine. And then one of us will be like, well, do you want to pray?
Fine.
Fine. And let's just say it's probably not the best prayer in the world. God is probably looking down saying, really? You guys are going to pray right now?
That was a short one. Did you really mean it? But I love that it is an intentional act, and it truly is a conscious choice.
Absolutely.
And a lot of choices that come in conjunction with making that choice.
This has been so fun. I think we need to continue this conversation on our next podcast.
I have a whole list of
I know,
this,
and we got
through one. Patience in growth.
Well, we hope that you've enjoyed the conversation today. We enjoy the conversation. I think we'll continue it a little bit on our next podcast, where Jamie and I will talk a little bit more about
my list.
Your list of
my
what
next
streaking
one
has given us.
Let's see, what do I have on here? A way to develop a growth mindset.
Ooh,
Maybe we'll
that's
talk about
interesting.
that.
Okay. All right. Well, everyone, have a wonderful day. And, get a hold of us and share with us what you're streaking at Jeffrey, Jeffrey, at streakingmastery.com.
And Jamie, Jami, at streakingmastery.com.
Until then, keep streaking.
It's the small and simple things that make the life we live worth living. Among the rush, do one push up, become a better you. It's the small and simple things that make you grow into what you're hoping. You're in a hurry, don't even worry. It's too simple not to do. It's the little things that make a better you. A better you.